John Noe unveils Greater Than We Believe with your host, Stephen King.
Well, hi there. Welcome back. It's good to see you again. My name is Stephen King, and this is my friend John Noe, and we are putting on a continuing Bible teaching series called Greater Than We Believe. We have many subheadings underneath that we've covered over the last 3.5 years. To take a subject and talk it to death, study it to death. We've talked about the greater Jesus. We've talked about the kingdom. We've talked about so many things, and right now we are under a discussion called the divine solution. If you've been keeping up with it, you'll see that we are taking, and right now we are recapping what we've talked about for the last year plus, having to do with the 4 major teachings about end-time theology. Those that you would call premillennial, amillennial, postmillennial, or preterist. Of those 4 teachings that are accepted by different people at different points in time, they're all the strongest teachings, and then there's subvariants of those. We want to come with a consensus of what is the purest, best, actual truth, not just people's opinions. And that's where we get the title, The Divine Solution, because God's given us that answer through His Word, the Bible. John has done a lot of study here. He's been recapping a lot of the main points that we made in the last year, so this will be fresh on your mind in a few weeks here when we get ready to do the synthesis part. This will all be fresh, and it'll just come right together, make a lot of sense to you. So right now, John, last week was 175. This week's video number is 176. This is part 4 of the discussion. And John, take it over.
Okay. Well, we want to talk about God's divinely determined timeline.
Okay.
And we covered this in videos 145 to 154.
Okay.
With Lynn Hiles and I. Back in 2014, we did 9 nationally televised television programs on TBN's network covering this timeline, and right here is the timeline. If you can see it right there on the big screen, and you could post it if you would.
Sure,
for
I'll pop up a
viewers.
picture of it for the audience.
It's also in this brochure right here. Now, they won't be able to see that as well as what is on the screen, but we did that timeline and walked all the way through it.
Yes.
And got into detail, and talked about it, all the details and how it started, had a starting point, and it went all the way through here. No gaps, no gimmicks, and so forth. 2 timelines. God, that was based upon Daniel's 70 weeks of years, and Daniel in chapter 9 of Daniel, and Daniel's time of the end in Daniel chapter 12.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do to start off this video is just to go back and do a little recap of that.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, I'm just going to hit on the highlights. Now, keep in mind that Habakkuk, 600 years BC, in that range, had mentioned that the revelation awaits an appointed time, that it speaks of the end, will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. Habakkuk 2:3. And then 1 century later, we come to this in the 6th century BC. Also, probably, and in keeping with Amos 3:7, that God doesn't do anything without revealing His plans to the prophets. He gives Daniel these two major prophecies: Daniel's 70 weeks of years and Daniel's time of the end. And like bookends, they like these things, like bookends.
Yeah.
They bookend.
Yep.
This whole thing. This was when it happened. It had a starting point.
Yep.
Boom, 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 boom. Exact, literal, sequential, precise fulfillment, and then the time of the end.
Yes.
Bam.
Yes.
No gaps, no gimmicks.
And if you take that bookend away over here, this just goes on forever.
And that's
it never seems to want to stop.
And that's exactly what we've done. We've taken that away. And, we've
It's too
inserted a
open-ended.
gap. This gap of delay.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. God help us. God help us. God help us. Okay. A word of caution. Over the centuries, many scholars had offered a wide variety of conflicting and manipulative interpretations, such as that one that you just illustrated there very well. In my opinion, the understanding, however, that we have outlined, and Lynn Hiles and I, covered in our TV programs, and we've done in videos 145 through 54. We recommend you go back and check those out if you haven't already. Is the most straightforward, clearest, historically documentable, and inspirationally impressive and defensible than anything anybody else is offering in the other eschatological views. No artificial interpretive devices such as gaps or interruptions or postponements or delays or elongations or twisting of dates or flip-flopping the segments and all that stuff are required to properly understand and appreciate this fulfillment. So if you're ready, let's now examine in recap fashion how Daniel got it exactly right. Literally, exactly, chronologically, and sequentially fulfilled how God did that. Daniel's 2 time prophecies, no interruptions, no gaps, and no gimmicks. You ready?
Yes.
Around the year 538 BC, some 2,500 years ago, many Jews, along with Daniel, were living in captivity in Babylon. And the angel Gabriel appeared to Daniel and gave Daniel a powerful prophetic vision in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. And I'm not going to read it.
Okay.
Because that would take too long.
Yeah.
We're recapping, okay? And this total elapsed period of time was 490 years, and it had a specific starting point and a finishing point and was subdivided into 3 segments. One, initial period of 7 sevens, or 49 years. Secondly, a period of 62 sevens, or 483 years. And a final period of 1 7, or 70 years. And historically, we have documented how it all transpired in a firm, unbroken sequence of chronological time leading up to the events of Christ. No gaps, no gimmicks, all right here. See the timeline. Okay, the starting point was in 457 for reasons we've documented in our previous videos. Daniel 9:25, from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild the temple. There are 3 decrees that possibly could have done that. Cyrus's decree in 538, Darius's in 520, and Artaxerxes' decree in 547. 547 is the one we think it most accurately fits that. For a number of reasons we have stated. And it will be in Daniel 9:25 says it will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in troubled times. And this was, you can read all about that in the book of Nehemiah, how they came back and reestablished the temple and the city and all that stuff. The second segment of 62 sevens, or 434 years consecutively. We note that there was no interval of time between those 2 segments. They were right up against each other, consecutive. And toward the close of this second segment, Messianic and by the way, that went from 408 BC to 27 AD. And in 27 AD, Messianic expectations were running high in the Promised Land, and for a good reason. That is because Daniel's prophecy of 490 years was well known, and its fulfillment was being anticipated even all the way over in Babylon, where the kings of the east came over to find out where this baby was being born.
Yeah,
they all knew about this. In addition, Jesus was probably born on this timeline around 4 BC rather than 0,
right? Because
of errors in the way we had to go back and redate all this stuff.
Yes,
because as we changed from
the Gregorian calendar didn't exist at the time.
No, right. The third segment of 1 7. Daniel 9:25, until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 70 sevens and 62 sevens. We have transpiring the first half of it, from 27 to 30. And in the middle of that, the Messiah would be cut off. Folks, that's the cross. Right here, right in the middle of that final 7. Exactly as it happened. And there's no suggestion in the text of any interval or gap between the 62 weeks and the one segment. And simple mathematics show us that 483 years had transpired since Daniel received his prophecy, and the Artaxerxes decree of 457, and it's now 27 A.D. The Christ, the anointed one, the ruler, he's arrived, and he is hereby publicly identified as a Messiah with his baptism in the Jordan River in 27 A.D., and then right in the middle of this time period, he's cut off, and that's the cross. No other event can possibly make that much of a declaration and determination. And all occurred exactly, sequentially, precisely, and it's a confirmation of messianic fulfillment of prophecy. So, the end of that final week in 34 A.D., the event that documents the finishing point of Daniel's 70th week, when the gospel would be freed up to go to the Gentiles, because before that it was only for the Jews, the Jews only. And so, do not go into Samaria, Jesus told them. Do not go there. Why not? Because the time was determined upon the Jews.
Yes.
But the finishing point of that prophecy of Daniel's 70 weeks occurred when Philip went to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the gospel there, Acts 8:5. How could he do this? Hadn't Christ forbidden it? Do not go into Samaria, or all that stuff. What's more, the apostles sent in Jerusalem sent Peter and John to Samaria as a support team. Well, how could they do that? Well, because the prohibition that Jesus had placed on it and God had placed on it was now over.
Yes.
And now the gospel was free to go to the entire world, which it did. So, in retrospect, Daniel's 70 weeks of years commenced in 457 BC with the decree of Artaxerxes, were determined in AD 30 at the cross, and was confirmed by the new covenant for 3.5 years before and 3.5 years after the cross, and concluded in AD 34 when the gospel had been preached to the Jews and was now free to go to the Gentiles, which is what it did. The entire prophecy transpired over an uninterrupted 490-year period. Here it is. No valid rationale exists, ladies and gentlemen, for interrupting the time frames anywhere. Or splitting apart the years, or inserting gaps, or elongating the weeks, or postponing, or delaying, or minimizing, or tampering with the fixed time period in any manner whatsoever, as so many interpreters in the church have done over the centuries, to our shame and to our detriment. Thus, the front bookend of the end-time, age-changing transition period of Daniel's 70 weeks certainly came and was perfectly fulfilled. Even so, not all was complete. More that had been decreed or determined remained to be accomplished, which brings us to the final bookend. And the final prophecy of Daniel's time of the end prophecy. And once again, the term is time of the end, not end of time. Big difference. The Bible never speaks about an end of time. Never. Daniel's second prophecy is found in his last chapter, Daniel chapter 12, verses 1 through 13. I'm not going to read it. We've already done that. But this would be for a times, and a half time. That's a 3.5 year period. We've explained that before. When the power of the holy people, which was the temple system, that demonstrated their exclusive existence or exclusive dependency on God and relationship with Him, would be finally broken. All these things will be accomplished, including all the things that it talked about in there that were to be accomplished. And there was a time period set up there of 1,290 days and 1,335 days. So the time period began in AD 66. From the time the daily sacrifice is abolished. That's when the daily sacrifice to the Romans that they had to do every day was abolished, and that was the starting point, as we've talked about here previously. Josephus records the only historical writings about that time. The works of Josephus records that as part of the Jewish rebellion against Rome, the Jewish zealots stormed Jerusalem and burned the palace of Agrippa and Bernice. They also killed the high priest Annas, and in retaliation for his liberal affiliation with the Romans. Next, they massacred a garrison of Roman soldiers, and to top it all off, they stopped performing the twice daily temple sacrifices for Caesar and Rome. And Josephus states that this cessation of the daily sacrifices was the true beginning of the Jewish-Roman War and in perfect fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy in Daniel chapter 12. He doesn't state that, but that's what it was. Both the Romans and the revolting Jews viewed this cessation of the daily sacrifice as a formal declaration of war, and the total cessation of all sacrifices didn't take place until the Jews ran out of animals and priests after the 3 times that Jerusalem was surrounded by armies. 1,290 days later, after that cessation of the sacrifices, the abomination that causes desolations was set up. There will be 1,290 days. These desolations, we have said, were many in the temple. I mean, many, grotesque. Killing Jews, killing other Jews, and other sacrileges that Josephus documents, and we have too. And the 3 rival Jewish factions were battling against each other, and even worshipers in the temple were killed by other Jews. Total abominations. 1,235 days later, now that's the 1,290 is inclusive in the 1,335. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 135 days. Shortly before Passover, in the spring of AD 70, approximately, if not exactly, 45 days following the previously cited temple desecrations we were just talking about, the abomination that causes desolation was set up. That's the Roman army.
Yes.
Was set up. 3 encampments within 3 miles of the walls on the hills surrounding and overlooking Jerusalem. This was the 4th and final encampment of armies surrounding Jerusalem.
Yes.
Remember, Jesus had warned his disciples, his followers, when they see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out of town.
Yep. Flee to the mountains.
And Jerusalem was surrounded by armies 4 times from the start of AD 66 through AD 70. The 4th time, which is where this is now, it was too late.
Yes.
But Josephus records that the Christians fled, and not one Christian was killed in the sieges and the destructions of Jerusalem. Isn't that something?
Yes.
So, in April of AD 70, the Roman armies, this is the 4th siege of the war, in September, began breaking through the walls, the 3 different walls protecting the temple area in Jerusalem. And in September, it was over, and not only the city and the temple, but the whole of biblical Judaism was utterly destroyed and left desolate. And this was a form of judgment Jesus had prophesied coming. See Luke 19:41 through 44, for example. And within 3 years, after that, and the temple was burned in AD 70. And after that, for within probably about 3 years, every stone was demolished or dismantled, in fulfillment of Jesus' most dramatic prophecy that not one stone would be left on another, Matthew 23. Certainly everything came. The appointed time of the end arrived. Everything took place literally, exactly, chronologically, sequentially within the 2 respective time periods, and is precisely foretold. No gaps, no gimmicks. And as a result, both the historical setting and the defining characteristic of Daniel's time of the end was achieved in fulfillment, and the power of the holy people was finally broken.
Yes.
Their exclusive relationship with God is manifested by the temple complex. And the Jews, it was broken. And that transition between the 2 ages, this present age and the age to come, was finished at the fall of Jerusalem, AD 70 to 73. Thus the end. The appointed time of the end, the Bible proclaims, is past, not future. Is behind us. not ahead of us. It certainly came. It did not prove false. And it did not demand the end of history or the end of time
Right.
or the destruction of the physical creation, which is all without end.
Right.
Isn't this something? How all this dovetails and fits together so perfectly. So we get to the New Testament, and we find a harmony here in the New Testament. Would you read us, if you would? If you'll get it ready there, because it's asked, well, how does the New Testament line up with all this? And the answer is perfectly, perfectly. So therefore, Jesus makes some emphatic time statements, such as Matthew.
Here it is. When you are persecuted in one place,
That's better.
flee to another. I tell you the truth, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes.
And they didn't.
That's right.
Hello. Matthew 16. Now we're going to get this one right.
Yes.
27, 16. Matthew 16, 27 through 28.
Okay. For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what he has done. I'll tell you the truth.
Now that's oath language. That means this is real
I
important.
take an oath, yes.
Okay.
I tell you the truth. Some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom.
All happened, folks.
Yep, it's done.
Matthew 26, 64.
Twenty-six, 64 says, Yes, it is as you say, Jesus replied. But I say to all of you, in the future you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Now, coming on the clouds is a terminology that's used in the Old Testament. And God came on the clouds many times in judgment.
Judgment,
It
right.
was never a visual appearance of deity.
No.
Never. But it was coming in judgment. Many of those happened in the Old Testament, and we've documented all those things.
Yes.
And lastly, let me just kind of, Matthew 20, 24, in a number of verses, 3, 27, 30, and 34. Jesus divinely linked this time period to his coming destruction of Jerusalem. He said this. He said, "Tell us," they said, "when will these," his followers asked him, he said, "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So will be the coming of the Son of Man. And at that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky." There were all sorts of things that appeared in the sky as signs, according to Josephus.
Yes.
I mean, all sorts. "And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory," and destruction of that old temple animal sacrifice system. "I tell you the truth, this generation," Jesus said again, oath language, "I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all of these things have happened."
Yes.
They did, folks.
Yep.
The new could not fully come until the old
Yes.
was fully removed. So, how does all this play out in the New Testament? I would like to do something with you.
Okay.
You think in terms of a rocket ship taking off. Nowadays we do it all the time. But I remember back when it was a big deal. You know, I remember when everybody would sit around their TV sets and see one of these things, you know. And you know how they blast off. You know, you get them on there, and the gantry pulls away, and then they get to the final countdown, and they go T minus 10, T minus 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast
Closer,
off.
closer. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
With what we call, and have called, the intensification of nearness language we
Yes.
find in the New Testament. verifying that this end that the Bible proclaims, and that we showed how it was historically fulfilled and documented in the works of Josephus, how it perfectly came, and as the time frame of 40 years from Jesus' earthly ministry in 30 A.D. To the destruction of Jerusalem in A.D. 70, as that time frame wound down, the intensification of Nearness language intensified.
Intensified, yeah. It's getting closer.
Now that's using the word twice, but it got closer. Yeah. So let's demonstrate that. And we've done this before.
Yes.
But it doesn't hurt to do it again, because this is powerful, I think. So, if you would,
T-minus 40 years.
Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things, how many? All these things have happened. Matthew 24:34.
T-minus 21 years.
Paul wrote, it's AD 49 now, the fullness of time was come, Galatians 4:4.
T-minus 13 years.
It's AD 57. Paul wrote, time is short. 1 Corinthians 7:29. This world in its present form is passing away. 1 Corinthians 7:31.
T-minus 12 years.
It's AD 58. Paul wrote, understand the present time, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. Some had believed some 20 to 30 years earlier. It's now only 12 years left until AD 70. Do you see how that works?
T-minus 12 years.
Circa, again, 58 AD, Paul wrote in Romans 16:20, the God of peace will shortly crush Satan under your feet.
T-minus 10 years.
It's AD 60. James writes, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near, at hand. The judge is standing at the door. James 5:8-9.
T-minus 5 years.
It's AD 65. The writer of Hebrews wrote, but in these last days God has spoken to us by his Son. Hebrews 1:2. Last days of what? Well, stay tuned.
T-minus 5 years again.
Later on in Hebrews 10:37, in just a very, very, twice said, very, very little while he who is coming will come and will not delay. And the church has been preaching delay for 19 centuries and counting. Who do you think we ought to believe?
T-minus 3 to 5 years.
Peter writes in AD 65 to 67, after the first siege of Jerusalem by the Romans, the end of all things is at hand. 1 Peter 4:7. And
then T-minus 3 to 5 years again.
Later, 10 verses later, Peter writes, for it is time for judgment to begin with the family or house of God. 1 Peter 4:17, excuse me. And lastly,
T-minus 2 to 3 years.
John writes in 1 John 2:18, little children, this is the last hour. It is the last hour. Twice he says it. That's in AD 67 to 68. The second siege is already underway. There'll be two more. If you hadn't gotten out of town by then, it's too late.
Yeah.
That's the end, folks, that the Bible proclaims. It was the end of the old covenant animal sacrifice blood temple system, not the end of the world or the end of time. Huge, big difference. And we'll pick up there next week.
Are you worn out? Well, it's supposed to excite you. And that's the whole idea. Like the countdown you were doing, these people, the wording was getting more and more intense. And I can just see, it's true, they didn't know the day or the hour, but they knew it was close, and they knew the prophecy. They knew when it was just right there. So,
and they were given the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely.
To guide them, to show them the things that were to come, and guide them into all truth.
Yes.
And if their intensification of nearness language proved false, we got big problems. We got big problems.
And remember what you've always said, the difference between when the Scripture says something's near and something is at hand. It's all the difference in the world. Because the house across the street is nearby, but what is at hand? Right there. Yeah.
The one who betrayed Jesus was
at hand. Yeah.
The Passover feast was the next day.
Next day, right.
At hand.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So we can see how excited they were getting, and it helps us to be able to understand that there was a culmination to Bible prophecy at that point. It came, it happened, it's verified, it's history, and now we're going to take that point and go a little further with it next week. And
in recapping
fashion, and then we're going to see what we can do with that. I hope you enjoyed that, folks.
Moving toward a synthesis.
Yes, John's worked real hard on this. I appreciate all the work you put into it, John. We're not trying to bore you with saying the same thing over and over, but sometimes, especially in deep things like this, it needs to be said a few times over to finally to get into your head deep enough to where it makes that little spark go off. You see the little light bulb for me goes, oh, yeah, it makes sense now.
Divine perfection.
Divine perfection.
In two creations.
Yep, two creations. God bless you all. We'll see you next week. All right.